Prior to Hurricane Katrina, I was just dead set on being the fancy chef, winning all the awards, making a little bit of money in the process, and this is really like what drove me. Like I thought, yes, I want to be this great chef. I don't do catering events. I just have this one beautiful little restaurant called August. If you're ever in New Orleans, make sure you hit us up. But it's really all about me, and my food. And isn't it beautiful? Well, then comes Hurricane Katrina, changes everything. So with Hurricane Katrina, I then saw the ugliest sight that I've ever seen inside America. I'd been in the Marine Corps, I'd been into combat in the past, and I saw ugly things there, but it didn't exist, not in my world. And yet, federal levees fail us, all of a sudden, chaos breaks out in New Orleans. The political pundits on TV wonder, should we even rebuild New Orleans? Why even bother doing this and that? And it's just a city, and we'll just build another one. And at that point, I saw so many people in despair, and I thought, God put me on this earth for a reason. It's not to create just fancy food. It's really about helping people. It's about using my talents to make the world better. And I think that's what we're all kind of called to do in our own way. So they're just basically what happened to my restaurant is I turned it into a mass catering exercise. We had no money, we had no electricity, we had no food, and we also had no rules, and so that allowed us to break a lot of rules. And so we broke as many of them as we possibly could in order to marshal the resources into New Orleans to help feed people, to give people hope.